moment and have a little bit of reflection. How was it?
It was fun.
It was fun. Anything stand out to you?
I thought it was going to be harder to be guided, but I think it was harder to guide.
Yeah. Wow, that's really good.
Great point.
That's a great point.
I figured out when you are guiding, you actually have to give specific instruction. Like you're coming up to a little ledge, be sure to touch it, okay, feel it, step up, there's a lot of instruction.
Okay.
The human anxiety wanted to know where I was at all times, but I had no control over it.
The other senses became heightened. My curve went to, I was comfortable, and then when I was not realizing exactly where I was, I became uncomfortable. And then we got on a rhythm of what meant what, I became comfortable again. So I went from, I know where I am, I'm okay for a little bit, to, it's a little sketch. And then after walking with Samuel for a little while, I'm like, I'm good.
Focus only one.
We noticed quite a bit of a difference between focusing on the one voice, and that when no one was around, and that, but when you got into the group, and that you had to really tune your ears to hear. And then the one thing that really gave confidence was, as we're finishing up, was actually doing the guide by physically guiding, taking them by the arm, or letting them take your arm.
On that note, how many of you at some point went?
Just once.
Just once. Well, at least we have one honest person.
So, I haven't done this before, but it was apparent to me that if we just had a conversation that had nothing to do with shipbuilding, the worry about where we were seemed to disappear. Still had to talk about, okay, we're going to turn here, we're going to go uphill, but there was less of a step-by-step worry. It was just a conversation. At least that was my experience. I don't know.
Yeah, I felt the same thing. Yeah, we were just busy talking and just,
That's so good. Yeah, by design, that's what we do. That's why you pair up with somebody you don't know. And we don't give you time to get to know each other. It's like, pair up, go. And it's pure trust at that point. Maybe. Okay, last one.
I was getting Chris, and
you don't like Chris.
I stopped focusing on what I was telling him, and I started focusing on what someone else was doing, and the poor guy walked into a wall.
Oh, so you took your eye off of him to see what somebody else was doing. Oh, wow. Wow. I've done this for almost 50 years now, mostly with youth, and it's always interesting to do it with adults, because adults do differently. Kids, they just start barking out orders, and then they realize that wasn't the right thing, and they figure it out when the person walks into a wall, or whatever. And I had one situation where we were doing it in the neighborhood, so this guy was walking this girl, he walked her up to this house, he rang the doorbell, and he hid in the bush. And she opens her eyes, and the owner of the house is looking at her like, what are you doing? So kids have fun with it, but when you do that stuff, revenge takes place when they switch. But what's most noticeable about adults is they basically come in two groups, and it kind of defines who you are as an individual. Because there are some of you who will not touch that person for the life of them. They're just going to bark out orders and pray to God they don't walk into something. And then there are some of you who immediately will put hands on them and lead them through. Okay, so there's different styles of leadership. And to counter that, there's different styles of learning. So what I mean by that is, if I were to tell you right now, we're going to go out this door, we're going to go down to the river, or to a lake rather, and you're all going to get in a sailboat and you're going to sail it. How do you best learn how to sail a sailboat? There's basic ways. Number one, some people just jump in the boat and go for it. Anybody like that in here? You don't know how to sail, but you're going to take that risk. Okay, so they're risk takers. Some people will go to the library or online and Google it and read instructions how to sail that boat. How many of you are in that? Okay. Some people will go with an expert and watch that expert do what they do, whether they explain it or not, and say, okay, I figured it out. How many of you would go with that? And then there are people like me, I will combine two. I will go with the expert and I will be reading the directions. How many of you are like that? Okay, so our leading styles can be different, our learning styles can be different. And then here comes the problem. How do we marry those two in ministry? That's kind of crazy, isn't it? When I first started out in Youth for Christ, I had a boss, our executive director. His leadership style was like this. His office door was always open, physically open. But everybody knew the unwritten rule. Don't bother me, I'm working. And the other rule was, no news is good news. If he wanted to talk to you, it wasn't good. That was the truth. And that's what I came up as a 21, 22-year-old. That's how I started out. That's the kind of leadership we had. And so I had to learn a lot. And then I got a new leader later on, a guy named Dave, who had a master's degree in counseling, who had a totally different style. Come here, sit down, tell me what you're feeling. I want to know. It's just something totally different. And so you've gone from this defensive posture to this, I don't know if I should tell you all this. So what we're looking at today is called the square, and we're talking about leadership square. Okay? Jesus' leadership style, and he says this, the time has come, the kingdom of God has come near, repent and believe the good news. That was his introduction to most people. John the Baptist was doing kind of the same thing. You know, and so Jesus says this. And so as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew, not that Andrew, casting a net to the lake, for they were fishermen. And he says, come follow me. I will send you out to fish for people. And once they left their nets and followed him, alone. That's what some people think, right off the bat, alone. Some guy just walks up to you and says, hey, quit your job and come with me. What we do know is this. People in that region knew something about Jesus. Because he had said something, he had done a few things. They didn't just blindly follow this guy, you know, like we do in the cults because of that. But they knew there was something significant, and there was an anointing, or whatever you want to call it, on him. And they had seen enough of him that they were curious. And so when he comes along and says, I want you to be my disciple. Now, people understood discipleship back then. We still have to learn that process today. And what I mean by that is, we think discipleship is teaching. Discipleship is a group encounter. There's accountability, there's living life together, there's teaching involved in that process, but it's more relational, not instructional. All right? And when they got a little farther, he saw James and his brother. Well, his brother John was in the boat, and they were preparing their nets, more fishermen. But without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat, and hired a man and followed him. Now, isn't that kind of weird? Sitting there with your daddy. See you later, Pops. And most human parents are like, well, I get your butt back over here. Where do you think you're going? You don't go anywhere till your chores are done. You know, that kind of thing. But they saw something in Jesus that they knew they had to be a part of it. So Jesus' development model versus our consensus model that we live today was Jesus used an adaptive lifestyle, okay? And so we're going to dive into that and what that might look like today, okay? Directive leadership, as Matthew 4:19 points out, he said, come follow me. In other words, he barked out an order and they did it. That's very directive. Your boss says, take these and take them over there. You will be at your desk by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's directive, square. And we'll go around the square. L1 will be leadership 1. Basically it's this. I do, you watch, we talk. Now, in a sense, in that trust walk was direct leadership. I'm walking you through life experience, and I'm telling you what to do. Because you're not watching, but you're listening, and you do it. And so that's a leadership style. And quite a few people lead that way when they lead volunteers, they lead staff, whoever they lead. All they do is give direction. Okay? Now, the person that's the disciple on the lowest level would be what we would call unconscious incompetence. In other words, they don't know where they trust you, and they're following you and following directions. some of you were quite miserable at that because you opened your eyes but won't admit it. Then there's a coaching leadership style. So Jesus got in the boat and the disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake. So the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him and said, Lord, save us. We're going to drown. So in that coaching style, what Jesus basically did is they know how to sail a boat. They know where we're going. You know, they need my help. So what he did was, in reply to that, he says, you got a little faith. Why are you so afraid? Then he got up and said, chill. And the wind and the waves calmed down. And you know what they said? What manner of man is this? Right? So in that process, he says, where is your faith? You coach baseball, right? You coach baseball. Once the kids learn the fundamentals and you're coaching now, you don't go, okay, let me show you how to pick up a ground ball again. The coach starts asking questions to help you remember what you know. And so he said, where should you be when the ball is coming? I gotta get in front of it. Okay, what else you gotta do? I gotta get my butt down. Get my hands down and bring it into me so I can throw. You know, you help them remember the things that the fundamentals of what they're supposed to be doing. So a coaching leader is, I do, you help, we talk. There is a dialogue going on. Sometimes we ask people to help us, and here's the classic example. We all at some point have been involved with youth ministry, okay? That's a fair assessment. So I got 60 people in the room, and I got 10 volunteers. What do I do with the 10 volunteers? Oh, you're supposed to be on the outside telling the kids shut up while I'm up here doing my thing. That's typically what happens, okay? That's the help. Is that really what I need them to do? Because the truth is, 60 kids, divide them up. 10 kids per volunteer. Now you've got, 6 kids per volunteer. So now you've got 6 kids that you directly minister in their life. Now they're really helping me. So what do? I start coaching them as they're working with these kids. Because they're not going to do it the way I do it. So they have a conscious incompetence in that they rely on me to give them input on what they're going to do. They do it their way, their style, but they need my help. Okay? Consulting leadership. Jesus replied, they do not give them something to eat. This is feeding of 5,000. But they go, we have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. How are we going to feed all these people? Now the consultant walks in. And so he tells them what to do. Break them down in groups of this, and so forth and so on. The leader now becomes the person, you do it, I help you. In other words, the discipler now becomes the person who does the work, but I help them and we talk. So there's a little bit of coaching going on, but it's really consulting. Because there's a conscious competence now. They know what to do. I just have to encourage them and lead them through this process. Because the minute I stick my hand in it, they give it back to me. See, that's what goes on. Okay, then delegating. This is the one we all like, you know. I don't want to take out the trash. Sarah, take the trash out. She doesn't want to either, but I'm the boss. I said, take the trash out. And so she does. That's how most people delegate. Whatever I don't want to do. Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. The delegation Jesus gives is, hey, you've seen me do it, we've walked through this, we've practiced it, now you go do it. Don't rely on me to do everything. Going back to that youth group, what if the youth leader calls in sick? The youth pastor. There's 10 people there. They know what to do. They take up the slack, right? But if I'm directive and all they are is helpers, set up the chairs, put cookies and punch and all that kind of stuff, that youth meeting is a waste. It'll fall apart. You cannot be a one-woman, one-man show, okay? So to delegate means they have the qualifications to take on the responsibility. So the leader at that point is the person who says, you do, I watch, we talk. In other words, they take their hands off and let you do your thing. There's nothing worse than a helicopter hovering over, I tell you. That's not how this works. And so, that person who's a discipler at that point is unconscious competence. They naturally, because they know what they're doing, they do it. Now, with this process comes all kinds of dynamics, okay? And so we'll talk about that for a second, okay? The lessons we learn, first of all, is multiplication. The more of us that can do it, now think about this. There's 29 of you guys, right? If I said go out and do a trust walk with a group of people, there's 29 groups that can go out and do that. That's multiplication. And you'll reach more people than I could have by going to 29 different locations myself. So it's not about control. All right? So in that process, here's an interesting dynamic. If you're a D1 leader, that's a person who only understands being a D1 leader. They don't understand how to be a D4 or a D3 or a D2. So I've got to learn that. Because if I'm only about control, okay, the situational style is totally different. Situational implies several things. I can be directive sometimes, I can be a coach sometimes, I can be a consultant sometimes, and I can delegate sometimes. That's just me as the leader, okay? Because depending on who I'm with determines how I lead. If I'm with a bunch of first-time volunteers, am I going to be a coach or a consultant, or which one am I going to be? I'll be the director, because they need direction. But in my mind, what I see is the potential for them to become what I am. So I begin to coach them at some point, because if I'm a D1 leader, but I'm working with L2 people, there's a problem, because they're like, you're never going to give us a shot, right? And it's even worse if I'm a D1 leader and I got D4 people. They're going to quit. You know what? We're going to go start our own youth group. You don't know what he's doing. And I had to learn that. I had a couple of really good volunteers back in the day. A guy named Jeff Stewart and another guy named Charlie Little. And I mean, those guys were so good with kids. This was in the early 80s. And literally, they knew what to do. And I kept trying to tell them what to do, and I kept trying to get them to do menial tasks. You know what happened? They went and worked for another staff person on our staff, and I lost them, because I didn't understand where they were in this process as a leader. And so that's very important for you to understand that dynamic. Now, most people, whether we want to admit it, and the weird thing about it is, well, they do delegate, but do they delegate for the right reasons? Then you got people on the other side who do this. And there's pros and cons to both sides. But on this side, when I look at that, I go, yeah, they do a lot of coaching and consulting. But what if there are people who really don't understand what it is you want them to do? So you've got to have balance in all of this. Now, let me ask you how you would deal with this. And I want a couple of you to raise your hand and tell me. You've got a staff team of 12 people now. You've got 3 D1s, 2 D2s, and then the rest are divided between D3 and D4. How are you going to lead that team? How are you going to lead that team?
To work in charge of your D2s and your D3s and pair them up, right?
That's a great option. I'm asking you. I'm not going to tell you what to do.
You asked for a response. I'm an evangelist, all right?
No evangelist here, buddy. No, but what I'm saying is, I said it's a great answer, because you've got to figure out what works in each of those settings. What often happens is we have a blanket policy, and we treat everybody the same way. Why would I want to take a 5-year volunteer and treat them like they're a first-year volunteer? But I've got first-year volunteers in here. This is not a Navy convoy. In the Navy, when a convoy travels across the ocean, they set their course and their speed by the slowest ship. And a lot of people don't know this. I have a lot of close friends that when you hear we're going to send the aircraft carrier over to the Mediterranean. You ever wonder how in the world in 48 hours they got over there? When it takes forever on a ship? In those type of situations, aircraft carriers go dark. A lot of people don't know this. They go dark because the longer the boat, the faster it goes. And it's the biggest ship in all of the Navy. And because they go dark, they travel quickly on their own. And they travel, they won't tell you exactly how fast an aircraft, particularly a nuclear aircraft carrier, but I could get behind it with a seriously long rope and water ski. That thing moves. And that's how they get overseas real quick. Well, but if I'm going to have a fleet, I got to figure something out here. And that aircraft carrier, when it's not dark, is surrounded by 2 submarines, attack submarines to protect it from underwater, a fleet of destroyers and frigates, and then all the airplanes on there, and a couple of supply ships. But they move at the speed of the supply ships because they're the slowest. So you got to figure that out, right? So, yes?
Going back to what you said there, if I'm allowed to interrupt you. To me, you've drawn a dividing line between someone who really doesn't want to lead and a micromanager. Right? Someone that can't quite let go of everything and wants to have their hand, the D2, L2, D3, L3, more of like the micromanaging lifestyle versus the, I'm going to do it, and then if it's something I don't want to do, I'm going to let you do it, but there's actually no coaching in between that. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, can we be honest for a second?
No.
How does your leadership style work for you at this point from what you've just seen? Let's be honest. How you know, if you don't mind, okay, how does that D1, L1? Because really, if you're a D1 guy with L4 people, how does that work?
If you have, it's just not sustainable long term, right? If you have some good people around you that you can recruit, you can let go of a lot of things, but you don't have anything moving up that's being trained to get to that D4 stage. So it's not sustainable. And yet at the same time, if you are on the other side, like you said, people quit on you because there's never the opportunity to break free and actually feel autonomous in their own leadership.
Now, what would happen if this happened? You're a D1 person, you got well, somebody clicked the button on the side of my phone, it's ringing in my ears.
You want me to answer?
I am 69.
That was a real L4 move of you.
But if you're D1, I mean you're L1 leader, and you've got a smattering of all this, and you said you're on that side, you can delegate to your D4 people whatever it is you're doing. What would you be doing at that point? Because you're not going to be directive with them. What would you be doing?
Doing my job.
Okay. See, that's where we have to figure this out. Okay, because what is your job at that point is the real question. Because, I'm just going to let them go. I'm going to let them run. But D4 people do like it, but you still have D2 and D3 people that you probably need to spend more time with. Touch base with those, spend time with those. So it's not like I go back to my office, it's all covered, and I'm working on my sermon now. See, this is what often happens in leadership. We disappear because we think we got everything covered, right? Jesus went to sleep, but when they needed him, he was wide awake. All right, let's talk about the pit of this, okay? Here's the pit of D2. It's really easy to go through D1 because you're barking instructions. And so I got these D2 people, what am I doing? It takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of energy to work with these people. You know, you may have to go over it several times, but you've got to help them learn. You've got to help them figure this out. Because if you don't, they will never move the rest of the way. So you have to invest time in them. And see, the boss I had the first time, he told me this. I'll never forget this. We do quarterly and annual reviews in our organization. So every quarter, we sat down with the supervisor. They walked through whatever it was going on, and you set goals for the next quarter and so forth. And then you had your annual review at the end of the year. So 4 times a year, you sat with that person. At the end of my first year, I'm sitting down for my annual review, because he didn't even have time to do my quarterly review. I just got an annual review. And so I'm sitting there, and he goes, you know, I got to tell you, I thought I was going to have to fire you. Those were his words. Like, what? He goes, but something didn't add up. I go, what do you mean? Everywhere I went around certain parts of town, your name would come up, and people knew you. And I couldn't figure out for the life, because you were never at your desk, you were never in your office. And then he realized I was out doing ministry. You know, what saved me was I am a strong extrovert. Now, I'm not saying this is the only way to do things, but this is what saved me. And because of it, I was out in my ministry area with people all the time. And people knew who I was. And every time he ran across certain people, it was like, that guy's really good at what he does. And he said, because of that, I realized you're valuable to the organization. Those were his words. I was turning 23 years old when he told me that, and I'm 69 today, and I still remember those words. But the second person that supervised me, Dave Shearer, loved on me. I not only had quarterly reviews, let me tell you one thing that happened to me. I was working so hard and so much going on, and we had a period of time when he came along as my supervisor. He was our assistant director at that point. I came in the office one day and he looked at me and he said, go home. I said, what? He said, go home and I will call you in a couple of hours. And on the way home, I started crying. He had enough sense to see in me that I was fatigued, that I was in what I would call ministry PTSD, because for 11 straight months, I had a kid die. 11 straight months. And there was nobody to minister. Came to my house a couple hours later. You see the difference in the leadership styles? So he took the time. The other thing it takes is they have to buy into your vision for the area, but develop their own vision within that vision. That can be a challenge. When you see a young person with a lot of potential, or a person in your church with a lot of potential, first of all, do they catch the vision that you have for the church? And if they do they develop a vision themselves in that? So you got to spend time with them. You got to help them start to see and feel that, and let them experiment a little bit. It's nothing like letting somebody fail at something they're doing. And failure is okay when you're failing forward. Okay? When you're failing forward, it's a great thing, because you learn from your mistakes. How many times did Thomas Edison fail before they finally with a light bulb? Every time you learn something new, they got him to where we finally had a light bulb. So vision is very important. Last one on that process is grace. Because they make mistakes, because they fail, you don't beat them over the head. Well, didn't I tell you to do it this way? You know, I've often told the story about one of my professors who, I won't go through the whole story, but the gist of it is this. We had a class, and I was winging it for about 6 or 7 classes. And finally, he looked at me one day and said, Mr. Douglas, you haven't said anything in the whole time we've been here. Because I was 19, I was more concerned about, am I going to make the team in basketball? And will I be a starter? Because that's what I did. I played basketball in college. So I kind of heard what everybody was saying, because I didn't have the book yet. And so I kind of winged it. And he was listening to what I said. And he had this funny look on his face, but he never said a word. He goes, okay. And so we went through the class. It was a 2-hour class, 2 hours back to back. And we got out, on our way out, he goes, Mr. Douglas, can I talk to you for a second? I said, sure. And he said, I'm really intrigued by your answer. Could you show me where you got that out of the book? And I said, well, I don't have my book with me. He goes, that's okay. You can borrow my copy. He slid the book over to me. It was a class called Minister's Obstacle. Okay? The book title was A Minister's Obstacle, written by Dr. L.G. Turnbull. He wrote the book, and I was busted. Okay? So, he could have nailed me in front of the whole class. That was grace. He could have nailed me when he caught me in my own mess. That was grace. What he said to me was, I admire your youthful exuberance. And because he said that, he said, you know what? If you don't study, you're not going to get where you want to go. You can have my copy of the book. I implore you to be diligent and learn in this class. And it didn't stop there. For the next 5 or 6 years, because after I graduated, he invited a group of us to study underneath him at his feet until he finally retired and left Warner. And we would come in, even though we were out of school, on a certain day and just study with him. And every year at Christmas time, he sent us a check for $100 with a note, buy books. That's grace. And so that's what it requires of you as a leader, show grace. All right, so in that process, and what you're going to talk about at some point today is Mark 1:15, a Kairos moment. It's a moment when you learn something, when something clicks with you as you go through the process. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But the question is this: what is God saying? What are you going to do about it? And that's the Kairos moment. Let's talk about leadership and discipleship. So what we're going to do is Michael's favorite, I'll show you a better moment. Silent reflection. You're going to what's catching your attention about what we just talked about. Okay? And then you're going to share with, should we do partnerships or just the table? What caught your attention? And then to the group, what is it that we need to hear? You've done one of these already. All right, so
1 minute. Yeah. Write it down. Writing it down is a key to practice.